Well, today we'll be talking about 10 bands where their first three albums are their best. And of course, this is all just my opinion, but let's go ahead and dive into this. We're going to go ahead and start off with one of the big names in the world of grunge, Alice in Chains, with, of course, the first three albums, Facelift, Dirt, and Self-Titled. And of the three, Facelift is actually my favorite. Now, I know a lot of people point to Dirt as their best or as their favorite, and for understandable reasons. Dirt would be a very close second for me, but I don't know. I've always really loved Facelift. Definitely one of the best debuts in the world of grunge, obviously, of course. No surprise there, but yeah, I absolutely love Facelift. Definitely an album you can listen to from front to back with no issue. I mean, so many killer songs, so many songs that are definitely some of the band's best work. Songs like, of course, We Die Young and Man in the Box. You move towards some of the lesser known songs on here, you can get some other really good stuff like I Know Something About You and Put You Down. I really like Sunshine. That's always been one of my personal favorites on the album. But yeah, absolutely love Facelift. And then you, of course, have the big album, Dirt, and definitely one of the best albums of 1992. I mean, so many Alice in Chains classics, Them Bones, Damn That River, Rooster, Down in a Hole, Wood, and many others. Angry Chair, of course. But just like Facelift, you also get some really good deep cuts in this album. Songs like Rain When I Die and Sick Man and the title track. I mean, all around, still a really great album that still holds up to this day. Then, of course, their third album would be the Self-Titled, and yeah, another really good album from them. I mean, of course, the singles on the album I still think are pretty good. Grind, Heaven Beside You, and Again. But you have other really great songs in here like Sludge Factory, which is maybe one of my favorite Alice in Chains songs. You move towards the second half, and some of my favorites when it comes to the second half, Real Like Nothing song and Frogs. But yeah, all around, another pretty good album from Alice in Chains. And then you know what? I do like the William Duvall stuff too. I mean, when it comes to the William Duvall stuff, Rainier Fog is probably my favorite of the albums that they've done so far with him, but Black Gives Way to Blue is also solid too. And Devil Put Dinosaurs here. That's probably my least favorite from the band, but still, even that album I still think is decent. But yeah, Alice in Chains is my first band for this video, but let's go ahead and move on to the next band, and that band is Disturbed. And yeah, with their three albums, The Sickness, Believe, and 10,000 Fists, I could see some people maybe making an argument for maybe Indestructible maybe being one of their favorites or one of their best, but personally, I still think their first three albums are still their best. I mean, the two albums they did it with Fuzz on bass, I still enjoy. I mean, yeah, The Sickness, I mean, so many Disturbed hits on here, like Down with the Sickness, of course, and Stupefy. But I think, especially with their early albums, you get a lot of really good deep cuts, or a lot of songs I feel are a bit overlooked or overshadowed by some of the bigger songs, of course, which is, of course, to be expected. I mean, but still, you get some really good deep cuts, especially with these first few albums from them. Songs like Fear and I do like Dropping Plates. I mean, that song does kind of feel a bit dated with the rapping and the verses, but I still kind of dig that song, not gonna lie. Violence Fetish is definitely one of my personal favorites on the album. I'd say one of the more lesser known songs on the album, but I personally really dig it. But then you get to this album, Believe, which I think is a really underrated album from the band. I mean, Prayer is the big song on the album, but I feel like the rest of the album is somewhat kind of overlooked, kind of underrated. Remember, I think, is one of their more underrated singles. But you have other really great songs on here, like, of course, Liberate. I really like the title track. You move towards the second half where you definitely get some of the band's most underrated songs, in my opinion. Songs like Rise, and I really like Breathe too. Bound is also pretty good too, but yeah, I really like Believe, and I've grown to like it much, much more over time. But then we move to my favorite Disturbed album, 10,000 Fists. I mean, when it comes to choosing a favorite Disturbed album, you definitely get multiple answers. Some people might point to maybe Indestructible or Sickness, but I personally go with 10,000 Fists. Absolutely love this album. I mean, yeah, of course the singles are still great. 10,000 Fists, Stricken. I do like their cover of Land of Confusion, but you have other really great songs like Sons of Plunder, which has grown to be maybe one of my favorite Disturbed songs. Absolutely love that song. Just Stop is also really good, and maybe another one of my favorites from Disturbed in general. But yeah, absolutely love this album. Definitely, probably one of my favorite albums of 2005. But yeah, Definitely got to go with Disturbed for this one. Moving to the next band, we got Filter with their 3 albums, Short Bus, Title of Record, and The Amalgamut. And I do like what they did after these albums, but I feel like they didn't really have any albums that come close to any of these 3. And if you were to pick one album from their later work that comes maybe somewhat close, I'd probably go with their most recent one, The Algorithm. But for me, when it comes to Filter, you just can't beat these first 3 albums. I mean, of course, you have Short Bus, which has some of their bigger songs. Of course, the big one being Hey Man, Nice Shot. But move towards some of the deeper cuts on the album. I do like Stuck in Here, which is one of the more melodic, more moody songs on the album. It's Over, I think, is one of their more underrated songs. Take Another is probably another one of my favorite Filter songs, but definitely a fairly strong debut album. But my favorite Filter album, it has to be Title of Record. Absolutely love this album. Definitely an album you can listen to from front to back with no issue. I mean, yeah, of course, the singles are great. Take a Picture, which is definitely one of their best songs in my opinion. The Best Things is, I think, is also one of their best singles. I Will Lead You is a song that's always been one of my personal favorites on the album, but yeah. And Welcome to the Fold is definitely a banger, but yeah, all around a really great album. And then you move to The Amalgamut, which is somewhat kind of an underrated album. Commercially, it didn't do as well as Title of Record, but still, personally, I think it's a fairly solid follow-up. But yeah, I mean, where do we go from here? Probably being the biggest song on here, but I think that song is definitely one of the band's best singles. You have You Walk Away, which I think is one of the band's best album openers. But yeah, I do like the heavier songs on here, like Call of Mind and So I Quit, but even the more melodic songs I think are also really good, like The Only Way is the Wrong Way and Goddamn Me. But I think you get some of the band's best deep cuts on the album, like It Can Never Be the Same, and I do really like My Long Walk to Jail. That's probably one of my favorite Filter songs, but yeah, really good album from the band, and yeah. Filter, with their first 3 albums, definitely their best in my opinion. But let's go ahead and move on to the next band, and that band is Godsmack, with the self-titled, Awake, and my favorite album from the band, Faceless. So yeah, you have their debut, which is definitely has some of the band's best work. Of course, you have Voodoo and Bad Religion on here, and Whatever, and Keep Away. But you move towards some of the lesser known songs. I really like Immune and Get Up and Get Out. Time Bomb, I think, is one of the band's best one of their best deep cuts or deeper cuts. I really like that song a lot. But I think they would do even better with the next album, Awake, which of course has some of their biggest songs on here. Of course, with Awake and Greed, but you move towards the second half where you get some of the more overlooked songs, and I personally really dig Spiral. That's maybe a contender for maybe being my favorite album closer from them, but of course you also have Voodoo and Serenity and some others, but I really like Spiral. I really love that song. Probably one of my favorite Godsmack songs. Trippin's also really good, definitely one of their best deeper cuts in my opinion. But then you have Faceless, which has to be my favorite album from the band. And I also dig, especially the heavier moments in the album. I mean, Release the Demons, I mean, that song through and through is definitely a banger and probably one of my favorite Godsmack songs at this point. And yeah, definitely one of the more overlooked songs on the album, but of course you do have I Stand Alone, which is one of their bigger songs. Same with the album opener, Straight Out of Line. But yeah, all around a really great album, which definitely another album that has some really good lesser known songs. I mean, but yeah, I definitely would say Godsmack's first 3 albums are the best. And of course they would go on to put out other solid albums too, like 4 and 1000 Horsepower. And when it comes to their last 2 albums, I think those 2 albums are easily their weakest, When Legends Rise and Lighting Up the Sky, which both of those albums I think are just alright, but for me they're weakest. But let's go ahead and move on to the next band. Diving into pop punk, we'll be going to Good Charlotte with their first 3 albums, self-titled, The Young and the Hopeless, and Chronicles of Life and Death. Now, out of all their albums, I'd say their best, or at least my favorite, is probably the debut. I can see some people making an argument for Young and the Hopeless. I mean, that was definitely a big album for them, and I can understand why that might be might be a favorite for some people or for some fans. But personally, I would go with the debut. I mean, of course, you have Little Things on here and Festival Song and Motivation Proclamation. Motivation Proclamation probably be in the top 5 Good Charlotte song for me. I really like that. Really like that song. Probably one of my favorite singles from the band. But you move on towards the second half and you get some other really good songs like Screamer and I Don't Want to Stop and I Heard You, but definitely one of the best debut albums in the world of pop punk in my opinion. And then of course they would get even bigger with this album, The Young and the Hopeless, featuring some of their biggest songs like The Anthem, Girls and Boys, and Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. But this is another album that I feel has some really good deep cuts like Say Anything and Wondering. Say Anything probably being one of my favorite Good Charlotte songs, but yeah. Another really good album from them. And then the band would go in a more darker direction with Chronicles of Life and Death. Another album I really enjoy from them. I mean, of course, the singles are great with songs like Predictable and I Just Want to Live, but you have other really great songs like In This World and Walk Away and SOS and Falling Away. I mean, again, so many great songs off this album. But let's go ahead and move on to the next band. We'll be moving to the 90s with Helmet, with their albums Strap It On, Meantime, and Betty. And I do like the raw heaviness of this album. I mean, some of my favorites being Rude and Repetition and Sinatra and Blacktop, but a lot of people point to this album as their best, this album being Meantime. I mean, of course you have their biggest song on here with Unsung, but you have other really great tracks like He Feels Bad and of course the album opener In the Meantime. But yeah, definitely probably maybe one of the best albums of 1992, maybe, but and for many people Meantime is Helmet's best, but I don't know. For me, this album and Meantime kind of go back and forth as my favorite Helmet album, but I don't know. I really like Betty. I mean, they get a bit more experimental on this album, but it still feels like Helmet, of course. But I mean, you have some of the band's best songs on here, such as songs like Wilma's Rainbow, Biscuits for Smut, and Milquetoast. But I also really like Street Crab and Rolo. Overrated, I think, is one of their more underrated deep cuts. But yeah. Definitely really dig Betty, but yeah. Helmet, another band I had to mention for this video. Moving to the world of nu metal, we'll be going to the next band, that band being Limp Bizkit, with $3 Bill Y'all, Significant Other, and of course Chocolate Starfish and the hot dog flavored water. They started off a bit more raw with $3 Bill Y'all, produced by Ross Robinson, legendary producer, especially in the world of nu metal, working with other bands like Korn and Slipknot and of course many others. But I think he also did an album with Sepultura. I think he did Roots. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he did. But yeah, $3 Bill Y'all. Still really dig this album. I mean, Fred Durst is not going to be for everybody, whether it be him as a person or his lyrics, his voice, whatever. But yeah, he's definitely an acquired taste. But I personally, I like his vocals in Limp Bizkit, but again, definitely not for everybody, but definitely one of the best. This is probably my second favorite from the band, but my favorite has to be Significant Other. And I don't care what anyone says with what I'm about to say, I think this is one of the best albums in the world of nu metal. Again, I might get flack for that because I know Limp Bizkit gets a lot of hate, but I personally really love this album. I don't know. This is another album from the nu metal era that I could listen to from front to back with no issue. I mean, yeah, I can see the argument for certain songs, or maybe the whole album maybe sounding dated or whatever, but I don't know. I personally still really dig the album. Nookie, Break Stuff, Rearranged, 1999, and Together Now, Trust. So many killer songs off that album. And then they would get even bigger with this album. I mean, yeah, it went multi-platinum, and you have some of the biggest songs like Rollin', My Way, My Generation, and Take a Look Around, of course, which was part of the Mission Impossible 2 soundtrack. But you also have other really great songs like Boiler, which is probably one of my favorite singles from the band. But yeah, I still dig this album. I mean, I can see why this album might not be for everybody, especially Fred Durst's vocal performance or maybe his lyrics, bars, whatever. But I don't care what anyone says. I like this album. Let's go ahead and move on to the next band. Continuing the whole thing of nu metal, we'll be diving into Linkin Park with their first 3 albums. So, of course, Hybrid Theory, and then Meteora, and then Minutes to Midnight. Now, with Linkin Park, especially nowadays, you definitely get a variety of opinions when it comes to what people consider their best album or as their personal favorite. I mean, I've definitely seen a lot more love for A Thousand Suns nowadays. Because I remember when A Thousand Suns first came out, it got very polarized. It got a very polarized response, fairly mixed opinions, but it's definitely gotten a lot more love years later, which is cool to see. I'll admit, when A Thousand Suns first came out, I wasn't too big on it. I liked 3 or 4 songs, but that's about it. But I definitely like the album much more now, of course. But yeah, of course, starting off with these first 3 albums is Hybrid Theory, which is often considered their best or one of their best by many people, and for understandable reasons. This is definitely an album you can listen to from front to back with no issue. I mean, the hits on the album still hold up to this day. I think I still enjoy them. Songs like, of course, In the End, Crawling, and Paper Cut, One Step Closer. But you have other really great songs like A Place for My Head and By Myself, which I dig the heavy riffs that you get in that song especially. Points of Authority, I think, has some of the best chemistry. I think with Points of Authority, you get to hear some of the best chemistry between Chester and Mike with their vocals in that song. I really dig their chemistry in that song. With You, I think, was one of the more deeper cuts on the album, but I personally really dig that song also, especially the work from Mr. Han, his DJ work in that song. But then we move to one of my favorite albums of all time with Meteora. This is a perfect album from front to back. Don't care what anyone says. Absolutely love this album, and definitely one of the best things to come from the world of nu metal, in my opinion. Perfect album from front to back. I mean, the hits on the album are still great. Breaking the Habit, Numb, From the Inside, Somewhere I Belong. But the deeper cuts are also really good too, like Hit the Floor and Figure .09, Nobody's Listening. But yeah, still love this album to this day. Definitely one of the best sophomore albums ever. Don't care what anyone says. Moving to the next album, of course, would be Minutes to Midnight, which I believe got mixed reviews when it first came out because it was fairly different from, of course, Hybrid Theory and Meteora. I mean, the nu metal sound was pretty much gone with this album. Of course, you do get some rapping, a little bit of rapping here and there from Mike, but again, definitely a fairly different album from Hybrid Theory and Meteora. But I personally still really dig the album. I mean, I can see why some people might prefer A Thousand Suns or maybe The Hunting Party over this, but I still personally really dig the album to this day. Of course, you have Given Up, which has one of Chester Bennington's best vocal performances. Of course, rest in peace. Bleed It Out's also really good. I also love No More Sorrow. That's definitely one of the band's best songs in my opinion. Hands Held High, I think, is one of their more underrated songs. Leaning more towards being a ballad, but I still dig that song. Of course, you also have What I've Done, which is another big song for them. But yeah, I still enjoy Minutes to Midnight. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next band, and that band is Slipknot with their 3 albums, Self-Titled, Iowa, and Volume 3. I do see a lot of love for All Hope Is Gone. I can see that album maybe cracking the top 3 for some people, but to me, Slipknot's first 3 albums I still think are the best. I mean, Self-Titled probably being my favorite. I mean, I know a lot of people point to Iowa as their best or as their favorite, and for understandable reasons. I mean, Iowa's another killer album, but if I'm being honest, especially when it comes to a front to back listen, I think, again, the Self-Titled is probably my favorite. I like the raw heaviness of this album. Of course, another album produced by Ross Robinson. You also have Wait and Bleed and Spit It Out on here, but I really dig the deep cuts in the album. Songs like Deluded, No Life, Liberate. I mean, I do like the weirdness in Tattered and Torn. I mean, all around, definitely one of the best debut albums in the world of nu metal. And then, of course, they would follow up with this beast here, Iowa. And this is another killer album for them. I mean, and maybe one of the heaviest albums in the world of nu metal, I'd say. I mean, yeah. I mean, this was another album produced by Ross Robinson, and also would be their final album to be produced by Ross. I mean, yeah, People Equals Shit, My Plague, Heretic Anthem, which is definitely probably one of my favorite songs from the band. And then you also have Left Behind. I dig Corey's vocals in that song especially, but move towards some of the lesser known songs. I really like I Am Hated and The Shape. Everything Ends is another solid banger off the album. I do also love Disaster Piece, but yeah, another really great album, and definitely one of the best sophomore albums in the world of nu metal. But they would follow it up with Volume 3. And this is the album where you start to notice some Stone Sour isms. I'll admit, I'm not a big Stone Sour fan. I like a few songs from their first album, but that's about it. For me, I never could get into Stone Sour, but not terrible, but again, never could get into them. But Volume 3 was actually my introduction to Slipknot, so I mean, I do have a bit of nostalgia for this album. I'll always have a soft spot for this album, but of course, I do love Before I Forget, Blister Exists, Duality, but I also really dig songs like Welcome and 3-0 and Opium of the People. But yeah, definitely love this album. Let's go ahead and move on to the final band for this video, 3 Days Grace. They definitely had a really strong 3-album run, in my opinion, with the self-titled and 1X and Life Starts Now. And I got Adam to sign all of these. This is a sampler CD that I got years ago, but yeah, 3 Days Grace, definitely one of the first few bands I ever got into, and still love them to this day. But yeah, definitely one of the best debut rock albums of the 2000s in my opinion. Not a single weak track on it. And then you have 1X, which is, I'll be honest, maybe one of my favorite albums of all time, at least definitely one of my favorite albums of the 2000s, especially in the world of rock or hard rock, post-grunge, whatever you want to call it. But still love this album. I mean, the hits are still great. Never Too Late, Riot, Pain, Animal I've Become, but other really great songs like Over and Over and Time of Dying. But yeah, still love 1X, but I think they would follow it up with another pretty strong album with Life Starts Now. But yeah, with this album, I really like No More and World So Cold. Bitter Taste, I think, is one of their best album openers. Break is great. Lost in You, I think, has some of Adam's best vocals. Probably one of my favorite vocal performances from him in general when it comes to his time in 3 Days Grace. But you move towards the second half, you get some other really great deep cuts like Bully and Without You. I do like the title track too. Probably one of their best album closers. But yeah, 3 Days Grace. And yeah, that's the last band for this video. Let me know your thoughts on the bands that I chose here. Do you agree or disagree with some of my picks here? Let me know some of your favorite or least favorite songs or albums from these bands. Let me know if you can think of more bands that would fall into this category and all the good stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment and a like, subscribe. Have a nice day and take care.